What is one of the best-selling games ever on the Nintendo Switch?
Breath of the Wild.
And if you want to make a sequel to that game, how long would it take?
A pretty long time.
So what should you do instead?
Re-release Skyward Sword?
Hot take! The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the best-selling games on the Switch platform, and the reason for that is because for many folks out there that bought the Switch on launch day, it was a launch game and the first game they bought for the system.
Also a good game.
Yes, outright. It is a very fantastic game. Takes a lot of different inspirations from a whole bunch of different Zelda games and other games and kind of compresses into one. It's a crazy experience. But because it is so renowned, a lot of people out there want another Zelda game quickly on the platform.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen with a sequel to Breath of the Wild so quickly.
It's going to take some time.
But there are some rumors out there due to an event that just happened in Japan that is basically telling us that we might be seeing a remaster soon of a previously released game.
Okay, so in Osaka, Japan, there was a Zelda concert, the Zelda Concert 2018. One very important man walked up on stage during one portion of that concert, Eiji Aonuma. Now, this is a man who's been working on Zelda games pretty well since the jump to 3D, let's say. Anyway, goes on stage, just tosses out like one sentence. He says like, hey, what if Skyward Sword came to the Switch? And then everyone erupted, and then Twitter went insane.
Yeah, it's a big deal, folks.
Yeah.
We went back today, and we actually played Skyward Sword again, because I played it when it originally came out. I bought it launch day, and yourself, I think the same thing,
shortly
too?
Thereafter, yes.
And look, I'm going to be honest, I've played a lot of the Zelda games. That one was not my favorite. Not because of its visuals. Despite the fact that it was on the Wii at the time, and compared to its competitors on other platforms, it had basically bad resolution and stuff like that, and limitations from the hardware.
Yeah.
The game still visually looked really well, like very amazing.
Yeah, to this day, I think it's one of the most beautiful looking Zelda games that they've made.
And unfortunately,
yeah, it's held back by some things, and that's what
some gameplay.
That's what we want to talk about today, because we're getting this rumor of a possible iteration of that game on the Switch. They have a perfect chance to clean things up a little bit. We did see the HD remasters of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker on the Wii U, and I think it seemed more like Wind Waker. Either it holds up better because of its graphic styles, or they gave that a little bit more love in its HD remaster, because I like Wind Waker. Like, I like what they did with Wind Waker more than what they did with Twilight Princess.
Wind Waker's art style just looks so much better than Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
And it's not that Twilight Princess is a bad game. I actually like that game quite a bit. It's just the design of it is different, so it was easier to transition one to the next generation.
Certain designs are better for like getting a higher resolution adaptation of that, and Wind Waker just happened to be that. So yeah, looking at this game, we went back in today. One of the first things, of course, that we were saying was like, wow, this is gorgeous. But can they simply take this and whatever, bump up the resolution, deal with some of the anti-aliasing stuff, to make it less blocky, and can we have a perfect game with just like one smooth sweep of the graphics?
Well, there is a way for us to play the game in high definition right now, and that's by using Dolphin. Now, unfortunately, if you're to play Skyward Sword on your Wii U, which is one of the best ways to play Wii games today,
that's how we played it.
You basically don't get an upgrade in resolution. You're getting the exact same resolution of the game as it originally would have been on the Wii, so there really isn't much of a jump up.
Yeah.
However, if you were to play it on Dolphin using an emulator, you can actually get the game to go up to a higher resolution than 4K, but I actually saw it at 4K. Now, on the Switch, we'd only be getting 1080p and a 720p resolution in portable. What I saw was a lot of visual artifacts that were going on because of the way that they did certain things. Now, in Skyward Sword, before we get into gameplay, let's just talk about the visuals here.
Yes, please.
It looks like a watercolor painting.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous. They went for that aesthetic. They knew what they wanted to do, and they did have limitations with the Wii hardware, but what they managed to do for that hardware, which is basically a GameCube, right? It is still quite beautiful. I'm a little worried, though, about... Well, we were talking about these things, about how some of the design choices that they made back then for that hardware would translate over. So one of the things that you had pointed out, and I agree with you, is that there's some weird blurring going on. You want to describe that?
So what you're getting is basically a depth of field effect. Now, how this works is the farther you are away from something, the more out of focus that object is, or those items are. So the way it works in the game is that it kind of makes this crystallized look that basically basically looks like a painting in the background that's moving. Beautiful look in the Wii.
It looks cool, and because of the low resolution of the Wii, it really works out, right?
See, the thing is, when you're doing something like that, you're masking a lot of the limitations of the Wii by taking those really complex objects and bringing them down to a simplified state. Yeah. So when you do that, exact same effect in high definition, it doesn't look the same way. Now, here's the problem. We're looking at this through an emulator, how we've seen it so far, and the way it looks through emulation is more crystallized and bad looking, like there's lines everywhere. So what Nintendo would have to do is they would have to kind of revamp that depth of field thing, which, by the way, not too difficult nowadays because we have hardware depth of field stuff and software and things that kind of have the exact same look. Depth of field isn't so difficult to do now. At the time, it was a little bit more, especially on the Wii hardware, it was a little bit more of a different idea. So what they could do now is make something more like that. But even if they were to just blur out the background, you would lose that watercolor image, right? So it has to be done differently.
They might have to come up with a whole different sort of design process for that, because we very much still want this to look like a painting, like maybe even more so than it originally did, right? Because with HD graphics nowadays, if you want this to look like whatever it is, an old pointillism painting or whatever, they can do that.
And I think another thing too, from what we saw playing the game again, I mean, when the game originally came out, it obviously looked like it was on a less powerful system compared to everything else that was on the market at the time.
Because it was.
You've got aliasing problems. You've got like a lot of just bad textures all over the place. And unlike Wind Waker, which basically had a cartoon cel-shaded look that just upgrading the resolution made everything look great, that didn't happen here. So what you're seeing is far lower quality images that are being used for textures.
We were seeing some of that in objects, like wooden objects and things, and like books, like some other sort of prop stuff. I do believe if they're going to go in and make this look as beautiful as it can, like they're really going to have to put in a lot of work in many of those textures.
Now, that being said, the amount of work they'd have to do wouldn't be as much work as creating an entirely new Zelda game, right? So what we're talking about here is, I don't believe they can just take this game and just move it over with an upgraded resolution. I think that they're going to have to go and kind of rework things from a visual standpoint. But I think what really causes that problem the most is the gameplay and how you control the game. Those things are going to have a major overhaul needed, and that also contributes to everything else.
Yeah, so I think the way that they should approach remaking this game isn't that there's just one or two things that need to be tweaked. It's like it is everything that needs a little bit of an adjustment. There's still a great game there. There's issues.
Yes.
There's still a great game there. But yeah, starting with like textures and things, and then going all the way into the way that you control the game and stuff, everything needs a bit of a tweak. Before we jump away from visuals, though, I want to like reiterate that the way that the characters look and move and the animation is still spot on in this game. Like
it's pretty. It was well done for its time.
And
right?
I feel like maybe a lot of those character models they might not need to have a lot of new textures for, but maybe.
You know, personally for me, the way I see this is that if they're going to go back and release this game is a generation old, right? There's the Wii U in between this. And we've seen games, even at the time that when it was released, it visually looked more simplified than anything else that was on the market from its competitors. So what I think they need to do is they need to add a little bit more. So for instance, you need to add some just volumetric lighting, maybe.
That's what they did with Wind Waker.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They made it look really beautiful that way.
And it's those things, right? When you look at certain areas of this game, they're very sparsely detailed because there wasn't a lot of processing power that they could afford to that. So you don't see a lot of grass that kind of comes up from the ground. The things you can see, you can cut, but there's a lot of things like that. The water looked really nice. Like, I think we saw that, and we thought even then, at that point, it was a pretty good looking thing.
There's a lot of gorgeousness of it, but again, it's a product of its time, and it was already on, the Wii was already old hardware when it first arrived, right? It was what it could do with its controls that made it special, stand out. Let's talk about controls.
Yes, this is where.
Okay, everyone like people who've played this game, you probably don't even need to hear this from us. But if you haven't played Skyward Sword and you're used to playing traditional Zelda games, the controls it's motion control based. Very, very much so, and it is
not like Twilight Princess on the Wii.
No.
because the Wii Twilight Princess controls are just waggle. You want to attack something, you just wag your
and then it's like pressing a button.
Yeah.
Here,
this one,
it is.
Yeah, you have to hold your hand in the air to charge your sword. You have to swing in certain directions.
That's right.
And it's using the Motion Plus connectivity
Yes.
with the newer controllers that they released on the Wii U and the attachment, or the Wii, and the attachment they released on the Wii as well.
Yeah.
So that gives it a little bit more control for what you're doing, but unfortunately, and look, this is a very debatable thing. There's some folks out there that really like this. From our experience and knowing how the game over time has been treated, we know that at the time, a lot of people were hiding how they truly felt about the controls being as bad as they were.
Yeah, I feel like more nowadays that's come out. People have been talking about that more.
When Adam was playing it, I was in the room with him when he was playing a certain sequence.
I wasn't trying to play bad, Shane.
I know, but there was literal scenes where you couldn't control the game properly because it wanted you to do something. But unlike this is a method of a problem I've talked about a long time ago, and I think we've discussed this once or twice before.
Yeah, what's that?
When you use a motion control item and you move your hand in a specific way, the way you moved your hand and the way somebody else would move their hand will never be the same.
That's
because
right.
it's a very finite thing. There's so many degrees of separation, so much calculation going on there. But if two people were to push a button, the button is one single input and it is registered every single time.
That's what I was going to say. You press a button and 100% of the time Link is going to move his sword every time you press that button. With these controls, not only are you unsure of like whether or not you're going to be hitting with whatever the way that you want to, but there's what's the direction? Is it the move you want to do? Are you trying to do this the circle spin? Or there's so many things that are up in the air. The minute that you try to input controls that are even 95% of the time perfectly accurate, I'm still like, no. I want it 100% of the time. I'm sure that I'm doing these moves properly.
You want the game to accurately respond to your input every single time. And every time there's an issue, it's not your fault. That causes an issue in the game. Remember, this game isn't short. The first 2 hours is pretty much just the beginning of the game, and you don't really go anywhere else.
That's the footage we captured.
Yeah, right. We didn't really want to get too far into the game, but the farther you get out there, there's enemies that are dependent on ways you attack them using these specific moves, and because the specific moves are never that accurate, it causes huge problems. I've seen people that are incredibly huge Zelda fans that have been playing every entry in the series who are, in the most amazing of ways, the most friendly, easygoing people I've ever met in my life, and when they play this game, they are reduced to anger and tears because of the way it performs with its controls.
So we talked about how it affects things within the game itself, but I want to add this too. When you're playing a game and things are not 100% accurate, or you're having problems doing a move or whatever, it doesn't just become a problem in the game. A lot of the times it can be fourth wall breaking. So not only like when I miss a hit or I don't do the move I want, not only is that like horrible for me, but when I see Link, this hero, this master of the sword, running around like doing this as he's running with his sword, like it's just so fourth wall breaking. To me, I'm like, okay, he looks pathetic. I never want Link to look pathetic.
There's a part where you're pulling a sword out of a stone. This isn't a spoiler.
We did capture this, so we could show this.
Well, basically, for those of you out there that haven't seen it, what's going on is you go to take a sword out of a stone. But the way that the game implements that kind of motion control is so awkward and weird that it almost looked like Link didn't know what he was supposed to be doing to take the sword out of the stone. And it's 3 individual motions. So it's they're giving you like instructions the whole time. Look, all I'm trying to explain is this. In that one sequence, it's like 3 different motions and a bunch of other things you need to do. In a normal, typical Zelda game, you would have walked up and pushed a single button, it would have been done. And that's the problem.
It wouldn't have been so bad if, like, okay, it was so intuitive and it happened, and again, it was like a 100% button press, your sword's up in the air. But this became a laughter-inducing moment for us because Link goes up to the sword, grabs it, thinks about it for a minute, starts to pull it up, and then puts it into the sky, and then starts moving it
because you can't get it accurate.
while looking straight forward.
And this right here is the biggest problem that we see with this game coming to the Switch.
Okay, so one of the things that we basically said is a necessity. If this is going to be a thing, you can have your traditional waggle controls there, your motion controls, but we need something that switches it up. Whether it changes. Well, do you have a different opinion?
I have a different opinion.
Okay.
You go. You
no, I think that you can have your traditional controls, but I do believe there needs to be other options. Whether it's mild sort of motion controls, or whether they give you the option to actually use the buttons proper.
I don't want to see motion controls.
Yeah.
Let me make this very clear.
Well, I'm in the same camp as you.
What I played with Breath of the Wild, Breath of the Wild has some motion controls in it, but it's not dedicated to those controls. The majority of the motion stuff you do see is stuff that you can choose beyond a couple of puzzle rooms that require you to move like a block in a certain way or whatever. But what I don't want are those motion controls to return. If they're going to do it, it would be very difficult because there's points in the game that you have to actually aim at the screen and stuff like that.
I don't think you can do it.
What they could do is they can create an on-screen cursor and they use the motion controls in there, which is something that Air Mice used to use way back when.
Maybe with touchscreen stuff?
Not with touch. Well, basically what happens is the left and right Joy-Cons can be centralized, so then they basically just it treats an icon in the dead center and then you move your controller around. There are modern televisions out there that use the same kind of technology. They don't have sensor bars in them. It just uses the motion. Way back in the day, before the Wii even came out, there was something called the Air Mouse. And the Air Mouse was basically a mouse you could use that was a laser mouse that worked normally like you could imagine it would. But then you could pick it up, and then using a motion control, you could aim at things. We actually have Switch games that have been released that use this functionality. I believe something Tower of Ooze.
World of Goo?
World of Goo. Ooze. I got that wrong. World of Goo uses that exact same. World of Goo uses that exact same input technology.
Yes, and I heard that Captain Toad uses some sort of technology as well.
Sure,
that's kind of point. So they can.
They can. But they don't. I don't want them to do it. See, that's the thing. Okay, don't do it. Okay, here's the thing. I believe that one of the biggest reasons why Breath of the Wild was so engaging for people was the ability to take a full Zelda experience and take it on the go. Yeah. The moment you implement motion controls, people have to put the Switch somewhere and take out the controls to play the game. Right. So make everything look. It's not. They're gonna have to do this anyway to make this game work on the Switch. So they might as well go back and redesign the game to work more in a different functionality.
I think. Well, hopefully Nintendo's had their sort of ear open for what the criticisms have been, because this has been the most divisive title for Zelda fans. I'm with you in that I do want the controls to be button inputs and to find other ways around the, let's face it, gimmick that is motion controls. But this is Nintendo, and I see this, as sad as I am to say, I see this more of them approaching it being like, okay, no, this is a big screen. A big screen experience alone. You always have your Switch docked when you're playing this. I could see them doing that before implementing the physical button controls. I want them.
I know. Look. The Wii has. When we think about the Wii, think about the way you control Wii games. With the original Wii controllers, you had the Wii remote and the nunchuck. Now, how this worked is the nunchuck was a smaller device you held onto. It had the thumbstick on it and 2 buttons.
That's right.
And then the Wii remote had a bunch of different buttons there, but realistically, you were only ever dealing with the maybe the directional pad.
Sure.
And the A button, and then the select and start.
The B button in the back, too.
The 1 and 2 were at the bottom. They were a little bit more difficult to hold.
Yeah.
So that means you actually had less buttons to use. With the Switch, you've got more buttons.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Yeah. If you don't use motion controls, and even if they had some kind of motion control use for people that want to use it, fine. Here's my thought. To make it portable, you hold down a button. Remember, there was only one joystick being used in this game. One button one of the joysticks will be used for camera work, so you move around whenever you need to move around and look around, however you want to look. But then when you hold down one of the buttons somewhere, it allows you to use the sword and give you directional input with the sword.
Yep.
If you could do that, it would make it so much easier. And look, okay, maybe add on to it. You want the touchscreen controls? Add touchscreen controls.
Yeah, I was thinking that. The more that we're talking about this, I'm like, touchscreen is so gimmicky that they could even approach it that way as well.
But add it on as an additional feature, right?
Again, then you would have it in portable mode, and then you'd have, the best of both worlds.
So what I'm saying, and this is how I think they should do it, because after Star Fox, I think they learned that not everybody wants one kind of control option. People want the ability to change things out. So here's what I'm thinking. If you're going to do it, have motion, okay? Even though I don't want it there,
It is going to be
motion.
there. No, it is. It's going to have motion one way or another.
Have motion. Have motion, let it be there.
Yeah.
For people that play it portable, give them fixed, hard controls.
Yeah.
But for people that want to use the touchscreen, give them the touchscreen ability as well.
Right.
Or have the fixed hard controls and the touchscreen all at the same time.
Sure.
I would be so much more comfortable utilizing specific slashes and stuff if I just had to touch the screen
do a
really
swipe.
quickly.
Well, we've had games like that
Yeah.
before that have done that. I'm thinking of, what was that epic game?
Blade.
Infinity Blade.
Infinity Blade. Yep,
Make
yep.
Zelda Infinity Blade. You heard it here, folks. Okay, besides the
They would do it better, I think.
yeah, probably, yeah, very much. Besides the controls, we talked a little bit about the graphics itself. This game is very story intensive. Like, for a Zelda game, okay, and I think this is cool.
Yes. This is actually okay. We were laughing while we were playing the game because we played a little bit of Breath of the Wild, and Breath of the Wild is like there's barely as soon as the game starts up, there's very little story, and the elements that are there are minor in the most amazing ways. If you dig deep enough, there is a story in Zelda that's a lot larger in Breath of the Wild, but you can literally play the game and beat it without really much, if any, story. Now, with that being said, what you get in Skyward Sword is way more narrative, way more characters, way more things going on in the game world to kind of bring you into that world. And there's actually actual funny moments in the game too.
So we were talking about this, because we were only playing the introduction, but we both kind of looked at each other halfway through, and we were like, I'm attached to these characters, way more than in any other Zelda game. Like Groose and Zelda herself. There's just so much more, so much more attachment there. Within, there's that scene where you're going to that it's the trial or the celebration or whatever, and she's playing the harp and everything, and you really feel like a distinct connection, a very powerful connection between Link and Zelda in this game, which I typically don't.
I think what they should do is they should take the voice actors that they had from Breath of the Wild and bring them over on this and just voice these characters. I think that a lot of the voice acting we got on Breath of the Wild was kind of wasted because we didn't get enough of it. So there's great dialogue here. There's a lot of really interesting lines. Maybe this is the time to do that. Look, I know that they could just take the game and port it over and make it sloppy and cheap and just get it out there, and a lot of people are going to be happy. But if they just went the extra mile and really just worked hard to make Skyward Sword a better experience than the original, I think it could attract a lot of customers out there that don't even expect to get a game like this.
Again, it's going to require tweaks pretty well across the board. Like we said, graphically, within the controls, you're not able to skip some dialogue and cutscenes and
Put that option in.
Put that option in there because, it was fine for us because we hadn't played it in a while, playing it again today, but 2 hours of dialogue that's not actually spoken and stuff. Sometimes you want to zip past that kind of stuff. One other thing I wanted to mention before we kind of wrap things up was, Breath of the Wild is now the best-selling Zelda game if you don't count HD remasters or whatever. Those don't count. So Breath of the Wild has sold the most. A lot of people, that was their first Zelda game. Right? And the Switch is a brand new console.
That's
it's
what you're saying.
You see what I'm getting at, right? It's like there's a new crowd here. You gave them Breath of the Wild. Now they want a similar experience, and they see another Zelda game.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Boy, that's a difficult one.
Yeah, is that
I never
smart?
even thought about that. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that there's going to be people out there that played Breath of the Wild and love that, and hope they're going to get the same experience with any of the other Zelda games, and they're not.
Exactly.
I mean, the best you're going to get is the original Zelda on the NES. That's the original one that has a very similar kind of play style to an extent.
That's the closest to Breath of the Wild. Maybe A Link to the Past or something is quite similar.
Sure. Actually, that's fair too. But I think with this one, I think what would be good about this is it would reintroduce people to, look, we've talked about Breath of the Wild before, and we don't believe Breath of the Wild is the most perfect of the Zelda games. There's a lot with it that it's not working that well, but the gameplay is so rock solid.
It's a great new beginning for the series, I believe.
If they were to take Skyward Sword and introduce a narrative and story and all that stuff and some older mechanics, then the next game that comes out can kind of bridge all that stuff together and give them more of a tapestry to play with.
Maybe.
Or, if they really want to be nuts, and I don't think they should do this, but if they wanted to, they could take Skyward Sword and recreate it using the new engine. If they really, really wanted to, that would be nuts. It would be a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know that that's going to happen. Right now, we did hear, there's a lot of Zelda talk recently, right? Because they did a job posting on, actually on Nintendo. They had a job posting. And then just a few days ago, we had heard rumors. I think it was from Eurogamer. Eurogamer, they're doing a podcast, and one of the editors at Eurogamer was like, "Yeah, no, another Zelda game's just around the corner. It's sooner rather than later." They might have been talking about Skyward Sword. I kind of think they're still working on the follow-up to Breath of the Wild at the same time.
Could be.
We've been getting yearly Zelda games. Not a lot of people think about this, but between the 3DS and all the other Nintendo systems, we've been getting yearly Zelda games with like only one or two exceptions for like a decade.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot coming down the pipeline.
Look, I think next year for 2019, Nintendo needs to really start throwing out tons and tons of games to get people into the mix. With the latest release of Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, that is now the fastest-selling Switch game they've ever released.
It's incredible.
And I spoke to somebody about this, and they told me in response, I didn't even think about this, went, yeah, but what else would you buy? And I never thought about that, but if you were a consumer that liked Pokemon Let's Go, Pokemon Go, and you wanted to, and you got a Switch, this would be the one game you would get, and you wouldn't get anything else. But right now, there's so many people there that bought Breath of the Wild that love Zelda games, so give them more Zelda. Do incremental releases of some of those classic ones. Look,
I think that's the plan.
The Wii U did badly. I think we can't hide that. And I don't think anyone can. The Wii U was a very poor system all around. There's a lot of things that are wrong with it. But Breath of the Wild showcased what the Wii U was capable of at the very end. But before that came out, we had re-releases of some really good Zelda games.
Yeah.
And I really think that not only should they be doing Skyward Sword, but just take Wind Waker and take Twilight Princess. And just bring those over. Bring those over onto the Switch so that they're portable, so that people can take it around with them and enjoy it. And I think that having some kind of just like 2019, the year of Zelda games,
like the year of Luigi. That was a success.
Yeah, I'm saying they do something like that because look, in 2019, the Switch needs to start selling incredibly well. And if Pokemon proved anything to Nintendo on the Switch, it's that the core audience of people that want Nintendo games are there, and it would take very little for them to take those original remastered games on the Wii U and port them over.
Yeah, make a trilogy.
Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned that earlier. Make a trilogy of the three Zelda games, the HD remasters. That'd sell wonderfully. The Switch right now is on a very good upswing. Between Pokemon Let's Go and between Super Smash Bros. Ultimate being the most pre-ordered Smash game of all time. Like, it's on a huge upswing. If they keep releasing big-name games, have an Animal Crossing somewhere in the next year, the Switch could do really, really well.
Yeah,
it's already doing good. It could do really well.
Yeah. Well, basically, what Nintendo's fight right now is to make sure that they don't have a loss of sales going into 2019 or a slump. Because if they have a slump, just like what happened with the Wii, it doesn't come back from that. Once they lose the momentum, it goes away forever.
But we have momentum now.
But they've got momentum. Exactly, right? And this is the way to do it. If they just take Skyward Sword, even if they just took Breath of the Wild, or sorry, not Breath of the Wild, if they just took Wind Waker and they took Twilight Princess and moved those over.
Made it a double pack or something?
I think people would be really excited for that. Look, it's got to happen. These are important. They're not going to make an entirely brand new Zelda game right away. And if they did, it would most likely be so close to Breath of the Wild that it would just be, story elements being changed or something. Maybe that.
What do you guys think? Do you want Skyward Sword on your Switch? Do you think, what do you think they could do with the controls?
Do you think that they're going to make them better? Because I hope they are.
Because they're not all that great.
Yeah, let us know what you think.